Hi friends, welcome back to Televra. More than 2,000 years ago, one Roman politician and military commander rose from a struggling political family to become one of the most powerful men in Rome. His name was Julius Caesar. Through wars, political alliances, ambition, and extraordinary military victories, he transformed the Roman Republic forever. But how did Caesar rise to such enormous power, and why did his own allies eventually turn against him? This is the history of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was born in Rome in 100 BC into an old patrician family known as the Julii. Although his family claimed ancient and prestigious origins, Caesar was not born into the richest or most politically powerful position in Rome. His early life unfolded during a period when the Roman Republic was becoming increasingly divided by political competition, social conflict, and struggles between powerful leaders. Caesar's family had connections to the popular political movement in Rome, which generally supported reforms that could benefit ordinary citizens and challenged the influence of the traditional aristocratic elite. When Caesar was still a young man, Rome was shaken by a violent political struggle between Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Sulla eventually gained control of Rome and began eliminating his political enemies. Caesar was connected to Marius's family because he had married Cornelia, the daughter of one of Marius's allies. Sulla ordered Caesar to divorce Cornelia, but Caesar refused. His refusal placed his life in danger, and he was forced to leave Rome. Eventually, Caesar was allowed to return, but the experience taught him an important lesson about Roman politics. Political power could determine whether a person lived or died. Caesar then began building his career through military service and public life. He served in Asia Minor and gained experience as a soldier and officer. He also became known for his confidence, intelligence, and ambition. One famous episode from his early life involved pirates. While traveling across the Aegean Sea, Caesar was captured by Cilician pirates and held for ransom. According to ancient accounts, the pirates demanded a relatively small ransom, and Caesar reportedly told them that they were underestimating his value. He supposedly promised them that once he was free, he would return and punish them. After his ransom was paid and he was released, Caesar organized a small naval force, captured the pirates, and had them executed. Whether every detail of the ancient story is accurate or not, the episode became part of Caesar's growing reputation for confidence and determination. After returning to Rome, Caesar entered political life. He advanced through the Roman political system by holding a series of important offices. He became quaestor, then aedile, and later praetor. As aedile, he gained popularity by organizing public games and spectacles. These events were expensive, but they helped Caesar build a strong relationship with the Roman people. At the same time, he accumulated enormous debts. Caesar understood that popularity alone was not enough to become one of Rome's most powerful leaders. He needed powerful allies. One of the most important alliances in Roman history emerged between Caesar, the wealthy politician Marcus Licinius Crassus, and the famous military commander Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, better known as Pompey. The three men had different interests, but each could benefit from cooperation. Caesar wanted political advancement, Pompey wanted his military settlements and decisions approved, and Crassus wanted political influence. Their alliance became known as the First Triumvirate. It was not an official government institution but a private political agreement between three extremely powerful men. Through this alliance, Caesar secured the consulship in 59 BC. As consul, he pushed through measures that benefited his allies and supporters. After his consulship, Caesar received command of several provinces and, most importantly, military control over Gaul. This would become the turning point of his career. Gaul covered a vast region of Western Europe, including much of modern France and surrounding territories. Caesar saw the opportunity to gain wealth, military glory, and loyal soldiers. In 58 BC, Caesar began his campaigns in Gaul. He initially claimed that Roman intervention was necessary because migrating peoples were creating a threat to Rome's allies. His first major campaigns brought him into conflict with the Helvetii and then with Germanic forces led by Ariovistus. Caesar defeated these enemies and strengthened Roman influence in the region. But the Gallic campaign continued far beyond his original operations. Caesar fought numerous tribes and faced changing alliances across Gaul. The Roman army under his command became highly experienced and increasingly loyal to him personally. Caesar was not only a commander on the battlefield, he was also a skilled organizer. His soldiers built roads, bridges, fortifications, and camps with remarkable speed. He often moved his army rapidly across difficult terrain, surprising enemies who believed they had more time to prepare. One of the most impressive examples came when Caesar crossed the Rhine. To demonstrate Roman power and discourage Germanic intervention in Gaul, Caesar ordered his engineers to construct a huge wooden bridge across the Rhine River. The bridge was completed in an astonishingly short period, allowing the Roman army to cross into Germanic territory. After demonstrating Rome's ability to reach beyond the Rhine, Caesar returned to Gaul and continued his campaigns. He later launched an expedition to Britain. In 55 BC, Caesar crossed the English Channel with Roman forces and landed in Britain. The expedition was difficult because the Romans had to fight unfamiliar enemies while dealing with the tides and geography of the island. Caesar withdrew after limited success but returned the following year with a larger force. He advanced farther into Britain and forced some local rulers to submit, but Rome did not establish permanent control over Britain at that time. Caesar's campaigns in Gaul continued, and his victories brought enormous wealth and prestige, but they also created fear among some Roman politicians. Caesar's growing popularity and the loyalty of his army made him a potential threat to the traditional political order. In Rome, his political position was also changing. The first triumvirate began to weaken after the deaths of important personal connections between its members. Crassus eventually decided to seek military glory in the east and launched a campaign against the Parthian Empire. In 53 BC, Crassus was defeated and killed at the Battle of Carrhae. His death removed one of the three pillars of the alliance. Pompey was increasingly concerned about Caesar's growing power. The political partnership between the two men began to collapse. At the same time, Caesar faced growing demands from Rome that he give up his military command and return as a private citizen. Caesar understood the danger. Without his army, his political enemies could prosecute him. With his army, he remained extremely powerful. The situation was moving toward a confrontation that would decide the future of the Roman Republic. By the end of the Gallic Wars, Julius Caesar had become one of the most powerful men in the Roman world. His soldiers were experienced, wealthy from years of campaigning, and deeply loyal to their commander. But while Caesar was gaining military power, the political situation in Rome was becoming increasingly unstable. Pompey, once Caesar's political ally, was now moving closer to the Senate's traditional aristocratic leaders. Caesar's daughter Julia, who had been married to Pompey, had also died, removing an important personal connection between the two men. With Crassus dead and Julia gone, The political alliance that had once connected Caesar and Pompey was effectively broken. The Senate demanded that Caesar give up his provincial command and return to Rome as a private citizen. Caesar understood that returning without protection could leave him vulnerable to prosecution by his political enemies. He attempted to negotiate, but the situation continued to deteriorate. In January 49 BC, Caesar made the decision that changed Roman history forever. He crossed the Rubicon River with his army. The Rubicon marked the boundary between Caesar's provincial command and Italy itself. Roman commanders were forbidden from bringing their armies into Italy without authorization. By crossing the river with his soldiers, Caesar effectively declared that he was willing to challenge the existing political order. The famous decision became associated with the expression crossing the Rubicon, meaning making an irreversible decision. Caesar marched rapidly into Italy. Pompey and many of the senators who opposed Caesar decided to leave Italy rather than immediately confront his veteran army. They moved toward Greece, where they could organize a larger military force. Caesar first secured Rome and then pursued Pompey's forces. But before going after Pompey, Caesar needed to deal with the remaining opposition in Spain. He moved quickly into the region and defeated Pompey's supporters there. His speed became one of his greatest advantages. Caesar often moved faster than his enemies expected, forcing them to respond to events rather than control them. After securing Spain, Caesar returned to Italy and prepared to cross the Adriatic Sea. His first attempt to transport his army to Greece was difficult because of limited ships and unfavorable conditions. Caesar eventually crossed with part of his army, leaving his trusted commander Mark Antony to bring the remaining troops. Pompey's forces were larger and better supplied, and Caesar found himself in a dangerous position. The two armies eventually confronted each other in Greece. In 48 BC, the decisive Battle of Pharsalus took place. Pompey commanded a larger army and believed that his cavalry superiority could overwhelm Caesar's forces. Caesar anticipated this strategy and created a special reserve of experienced soldiers to counter Pompey's cavalry. During the battle, Caesar's troops managed to break through Pompey's lines. The larger army of Pompey was defeated. Pompey escaped from the battlefield and fled toward Egypt. Caesar followed him, but when he arrived in Egypt, he discovered that Pompey had already been murdered. Egyptian officials had killed Pompey and presented his severed head to Caesar, hoping to gain his approval. Instead, Caesar was reportedly disturbed by the killing. Pompey had once been his ally, his son-in-law, and his political partner. Caesar now became involved in the political struggle of Egypt. At the time, Egypt was ruled by the young king Ptolemy XIII and his sister Cleopatra VII. The two were involved in a struggle for power. Cleopatra sought Caesar's support and managed to meet him secretly. Ancient accounts describe her being brought into Caesar's presence in a concealed manner, although some details of the story have been exaggerated over time. Caesar recognized Cleopatra as a capable political figure and became involved in the Egyptian conflict. Fighting broke out in Alexandria between Caesar's forces and those supporting Ptolemy. Caesar's army was initially small, and he faced a dangerous situation. Eventually, reinforcements arrived and Caesar's forces defeated the opposition. Cleopatra emerged as the dominant ruler of Egypt, ruling alongside her younger brother according to the traditional arrangement. Caesar spent time in Egypt and developed a close relationship with Cleopatra. Their relationship became politically important as well as personal. Cleopatra later had a son, Caesarion, whom she claimed was Caesar's child. Caesar did not officially make Caesarion his Roman heir, but the child's existence would later become politically significant. After Egypt, Caesar continued dealing with military threats. He moved into Asia Minor and defeated Pharnaces II of Pontus at the Battle of Zela in 47 BC. The victory was so rapid that Caesar reportedly described it with the famous phrase Veni, Vidi, Vici, I came, I saw, I conquered. Caesar returned to Rome as the dominant political figure in the Republic, but victory did not end the civil war. Some of Pompey's supporters continued fighting in Africa and Spain. Caesar eventually defeated these remaining forces. In 46 BC, he won a major victory at Thapsus in North Africa. The defeat of his opponents left Caesar with almost unmatched political power. He returned to Rome and was appointed dictator. Unlike earlier temporary dictators, Caesar's position gradually became much more permanent. He began introducing political and administrative reforms. One of his most important achievements was the reform of the Roman calendar. The old Roman calendar had become inaccurate because its system did not properly match the solar year. Caesar introduced the Julian calendar, which established a more regular system of months and leap years. The reform became the foundation for the calendar used across much of Europe for centuries. Caesar also worked on reforms involving citizenship, debt, administration, and the expansion of Roman colonies. He settled some veterans in new colonies and attempted to reorganize parts of the Roman state. He also increased the number of people who could participate in Roman administration and expanded citizenship in some areas. But Caesar's growing power created deep anxiety among many senators. The Roman Republic had traditionally been based on the idea that no single man should permanently dominate the state. Caesar's titles, honors, and increasing authority appeared to many Romans to resemble monarchy. Statues were erected in his honor, and he received extraordinary political privileges. In 44 BC, Caesar was appointed dictator perpetuo, meaning dictator in perpetuity. To his supporters, this could represent stability after years of civil war. To his opponents, it looked like the end of the Republic. Rumors spread that Caesar wanted to become king. The title king was deeply unpopular in Roman political culture because Romans believed they had expelled their last king centuries earlier. Caesar publicly rejected the title of king when it was offered in a political setting, but suspicion remained. A group of senators began secretly planning against him. Among them were Gaius Cassius Longinus and Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus was particularly significant because Caesar had shown him mercy after the Civil War and had trusted him politically. The conspirators believed that killing Caesar was necessary to prevent Rome from becoming a monarchy. Their plan was to attack him during a Senate meeting. Caesar's supporters had warned him that there were dangers around him, and ancient sources describe several warnings and omens before the assassination. Caesar nevertheless continued with his plans. On March 15, 44 BC, the day known as the Ides of March, Caesar went to a meeting of the Senate. The conspirators surrounded him. They attacked him with daggers, and Caesar was killed after being stabbed repeatedly. Ancient sources provide different details about his final words, and the famous phrase "et tu, Brute" is largely a later literary tradition rather than a reliable historical record. Caesar's assassination did not save the Roman Republic. Instead, it created another period of violence and civil war. The men who killed Caesar had expected his death to restore traditional republican government, but they had underestimated the loyalty of Caesar's supporters and the political power he had accumulated. Rome was about to enter another struggle for control. After Caesar's assassination, Rome did not return to peace. Instead, his death created another struggle for power. The conspirators had believed that killing Caesar would restore the Roman Republic, but they had not planned for the reaction of Caesar's supporters. Mark Antony, one of Caesar's most trusted commanders, quickly emerged as a major political force. Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, was still very young, but he would soon become another central figure in Rome's future. At first, Antony and Octavian were political rivals, but they eventually joined forces with Marcus Aemilius Lepidus. Together, they formed the Second Triumvirate in 43 BC. Unlike the First Triumvirate, this alliance was formally recognized and gave its members extraordinary authority. The three men immediately moved against their political enemies. A series of executions followed, and many senators and other Roman citizens were killed. Among those targeted was Cicero, one of Rome's most famous politicians and speakers. The conspirators who had killed Caesar were also pursued. Brutus and Cassius had gathered forces in the eastern provinces and prepared to fight the armies of Antony and Octavian. In 42 BC, the two sides met at the Battle of Philippi in Macedonia. The forces of Antony and Octavian eventually defeated Brutus and Cassius. Cassius died during the fighting, and Brutus later took his own life after realizing that the cause of the conspirators had failed. With Caesar's assassins defeated, the Roman world was divided among the surviving members of the Second Triumvirate. Antony took control of the eastern territories, while Octavian controlled much of the west. Lepidus received control of North Africa. But this arrangement could not last forever. Antony became increasingly connected with Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. Their relationship was both personal and political. Cleopatra possessed enormous wealth and controlled one of the most important kingdoms in the Mediterranean. Antony relied on Egyptian resources while preparing for his eastern ambitions. In Rome, Octavian used Antony's relationship with Cleopatra to present him as a man who had abandoned Roman interests for a foreign queen. Political propaganda portrayed Cleopatra as a threat to Rome and Antony as a leader under her influence. Tensions between Antony and Octavian eventually became impossible to control. In 31 BC, their forces met at the Battle of Actium in western Greece. Octavian's forces, commanded by his general Agrippa, defeated the fleet of Antony and Cleopatra. Antony and Cleopatra escaped to Egypt, but their position was now hopeless. The following year, Octavian invaded Egypt. Antony and Cleopatra both died in 30 BC. Octavian became the undisputed ruler of the Roman world. He would later take the name Augustus and become the first Roman emperor. Although Caesar himself had never officially become emperor, the political system he left behind made the rise of Augustus possible. The Roman Republic that Caesar had dominated was effectively transformed into an imperial system. Caesar's name itself became a symbol of supreme political authority. Later Roman rulers adopted variations of his name, and the word eventually influenced titles such as Kaiser and Tsar. Caesar's legacy was therefore much larger than his personal political career. His military campaigns had expanded Roman territory enormously, especially in Gaul. His reforms changed aspects of Roman government and administration. His calendar reform influenced the development of the modern calendar. His writings, particularly his accounts of the Gallic Wars and the Civil War, became important historical sources and examples of Latin prose. But Caesar's legacy also raises difficult questions. Was he a defender of Rome who brought stability after years of political violence, or was he an ambitious politician who destroyed the Republic's traditional system? Historians have debated this question for centuries. Caesar certainly did not create the problems that had weakened the Roman Republic. Long before his rise, Rome had experienced political violence, economic inequality, military competition, and rivalry between powerful commanders. But Caesar's actions accelerated the collapse of the republican system. His victories gave him enormous military power, and his political decisions increasingly concentrated authority in his own hands. His opponents feared that Rome was moving toward monarchy. Caesar's assassination was intended to stop that process, but it produced the opposite result. Instead of restoring the old republic, the assassination opened the way for another series of civil wars. Eventually, Augustus established a new political system in which one ruler held dominant authority while republican institutions continued to exist in modified form. In this sense, Caesar became one of the most important figures in the transition from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. His life also demonstrates how closely military power and politics were connected in late Republican Rome. Caesar's soldiers were not simply an army fighting for Rome, they became deeply loyal to their commander. That loyalty allowed Caesar to challenge the Senate and cross the Rubicon. His opponents understood the danger of allowing a successful general to retain control of a powerful army, but they could not agree on how to deal with him. Caesar's ability to combine military success, political alliances, public popularity, and personal ambition made him exceptionally difficult to defeat. His relationship with the Roman people was also complicated. Many ordinary Romans admired Caesar because of his military victories, public generosity, and reforms. He organized games, distributed land to veterans, and attempted to address some social and economic problems. But popularity among the people made the Senate even more suspicious of him. Caesar understood the importance of public image and political communication. His writings about his campaigns presented him as a rational commander responding to threats and protecting Roman interests. These writings remain famous because they provided detailed account of Roman warfare from Caesar's own perspective. At the same time, historians recognize that Caesar was writing about his own actions and therefore had reasons to present events in a favorable way. His story must be understood through both his achievements and the consequences of his actions. Julius Caesar died in 44 BC, but the political transformation connected with his name continued for generations. The Republic had existed for centuries, yet within a few decades of Caesar's rise, Rome had become an empire ruled by emperors. The transformation was not caused by Caesar alone, but his career was one of the decisive stages in that process. From his early political struggles to his conquest of Gaul, from the crossing of the Rubicon to the defeat of Pompey, from his rise as dictator to his assassination, Caesar's life was closely connected to the greatest political crisis of the Roman Republic. His story is therefore not simply the story of a powerful Roman man. It is the story of a republic struggling with its own success, a political system unable to control the ambitions of its most powerful leaders, and a society moving toward a completely different form of government. More than 2,000 years later, Julius Caesar remains one of the most recognizable figures in history. His name is associated with military genius, political ambition, reform, power, betrayal, and assassination. But perhaps the most important part of his legacy is what happened after he died. The men who killed Caesar believed they were saving the Republic. Instead, their actions helped create the conditions for Rome's transformation into an empire. Caesar did not live to become Rome's first emperor, but his career helped make the imperial age possible. His life ended on the floor of the Roman Senate, but the political world he had helped reshape continued to evolve long after his death. And that is why Julius Caesar remains such an important figure in history, not only because of the battles he won or the power he gained, but because his rise and fall marked one of the great turning points between the ancient Roman Republic and the Roman Empire.